I would like to see, before I start selling any silver, I want to see some kind of a mania. I want to see some kind of a public enthusiasm. I want to see a positive media coverage of the silver market. I want to see, just as the way they cover right now, they cover Bitcoin and the way they cover all those tech stocks. I want to see some enthusiasm in the media in regards to silver before I even consider selling some. And of course, there's none of that.
Hello and welcome. Silver has been added to the draft critical minerals list by the United States, and I hope everyone seriously considers what this could imply. Saying that silver is critical for our lives today is absolutely correct. The modern world could not function without it. It makes sense that silver was added to the draft critical minerals list because it is needed for electric cars, cell phones, computers, medical applications, and military equipment. Now, I don't want everyone to get too excited yet because right now it's just been added to the draft list. So we might have to wait for a few months before the final list is released. Now, what if it does get added to the official list? What could this imply for silver?
Well, first of all, I want to stress this is the first official recognition by the federal government that there's something wrong with the silver market. So, although this is just a draft, it's not the final report yet, this gives us reason to be optimistic.
Right, absolutely. It is a good sign. Now, this can imply multiple things. For example, if it gets added to the list, the government could decide to start stockpiling silver. I see this as being possible or perhaps even likely because silver has been in a supply deficit for years, which means the nation's national security could be at risk if the US didn't have access to silver due to unstable supply chains. Another thing that it could imply, well, the government could implement export controls. Wouldn't surprise me after they look at the silver market and they realize the domestic supply is too small to meet the nation's demand. This could lead to them deciding to cap the amount of silver that can leave the country. So they might start requiring a license to export it. This would make it much easier for them to keep an eye on the market and see how much was leaving the country in order for them to easily limit the amount that's going out. Another thing that could happen is the US could start incentivizing mining and recycling in the country by offering tax credits or low interest loans to help companies increase the domestic silver supply.
Yes, all of the measures you've pointed out, there are possible outcomes of this reclassification of silver as a potential critical mineral. Now, the thing is that all of those measures could turn out to be counterproductive. I mean, like, yes, the federal government could change its policy towards mining and, cut down on the red tape, allow miners to operate more freely and try to increase the supply from US silver mines this way. But just the attention that this gives to silver as a critical metal could increase the investment demand in silver, could also increase hoarding by companies which consume silver, for instance, electronics companies. It could end up increasing the demand to such an extent that will outweigh any increase in supply. You see what I mean?
Sure, absolutely. I could definitely see it leading to companies hoarding silver, and I could also see it leading to other countries deciding that they need to start hoarding silver as well if they sense that the market's going to be really tight for a long period of time. As we have discussed before, it takes a long time to set up a mining operation. There's not much recycling going on right now. So if the market gets cornered by, a major government, the strongest economy on the planet, it might be slim pickings for folks who are trying to onboard silver in the coming years.
Yes. I want to say a few words about the methodology of this report. They have this interesting way of trying to calculate how critical every mineral is. They do that by multiplying the probability, the likelihood of a disruption in supply by the negative effect that this could have on the GDP. So this way, they get this weighted sum of money that the US economy could lose due to disruptions in the supply of that mineral. And that's just a way of trying to assess the risk which is involved with each and every one of those minerals. So it will be interesting to see how they value silver. How many billions do they expect to lose due to a shortage in silver? Probably that report will downplay the impact of a shortage of silver because you and I know that silver exists in tiny amounts in so many applications. So, and I think that if they were to give you the real number, the true impact of a shortage of silver on the market, it will be just too much of a shock to the people reading that report. So I think they can't afford to really tell you the true number, but it will still be interesting to see how they try to quantify the potential of a shortage of silver on the US economy. Even the tiniest recognition that it could be a problem is meaningful when it comes to investors. And I think this has the potential to raise the issue to the attention of investors.
Sure, absolutely. And as we've discussed before, investor demand alone could wipe the market out. There's less available silver out there than there is gold. If just half of the money invested in Apple went directly into physical silver, it would wipe the market out.
Many
And
times
if,
over.
oh yeah, it's really staggering. Um,
We were saying, in I think one of our discussions, we mentioned that the market value of the leading seven tech stocks, the Magnificent Seven, could buy you something like 700 years worth of global mine supply of silver.
yeah, it's something crazy like that. If the US government decides to enter the silver market, it could cause the price to moonshot over the next few years, especially if they decide that they want to stockpile enough for the US to sustain itself for years in the event of global turmoil. Even if it was just enough for the US to keep going, if it was assumed that there would not be access to imported silver, but the domestic supply would remain stable, this could still have huge implications for the already really tight silver market because it's estimated the US imports about 79% of the silver it uses each year.
Yeah, right. If the federal government were to enter the silver market, undoubtedly the price would skyrocket almost overnight. And so they can't start buying silver on the open. They will either try to do that clandestinely or they're going to have to somehow restrict the ability of speculators to enter the market. And that too, I think, will have a huge impact on the price of silver, just not new silver, which is coming to the market, and not the futures price of silver, but certainly the price of bullion on the retail side of the market. Because if you can't buy any new silver and you can only buy out of the existing pool of bullion, which is traded already within the hands of the public, then the value of that bullion suddenly becomes a lot higher than it is today. The premium on that silver suddenly goes to the moon. You see what I mean?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and that's an interesting thought. I wonder if we could see a scenario where they ended up adding it to the critical minerals list, but then they just didn't mention that they were going to start stockpiling it and did try to figure out some covert way of buying it, maybe through companies that they set up. Sometimes they say the CIA will set up a company to purchase certain things just so you don't know it's the CIA doing it. And yet, who knows? Maybe they would do something like that in a scenario like this.
Yes, but then if it gets found out, then they're in trouble.
Right, absolutely. I do wonder if just it getting added to the list, just that it showed up on the radar, would cause other governments to also start stockpiling silver. We just saw Russia last year announced that they are going to start holding silver in their reserves. So, maybe other countries would start following suit.
Yes, it is certainly possible that this is the first step on the way to the government recognizing that there is a problem with silver and deciding to hoard it as well. But again, when push comes to shove, when they try to do it effectively, they will discover that it's a lot more difficult than they thought because the true price of silver under those conditions that governments are starting to hoard it should be a lot higher than it is today. Now, I just want to mention that, this list is compiled by the US Geological Survey, and the people working for the Geological Survey are focused on the industrial side of the market. They're thinking of silver as an industrial commodity and nothing more. I don't think there are Austrian economists telling them, working with them, telling them that silver is money, that silver has such a long tradition of serving as money, and that the moment that you start recognizing it as valuable, then you generate interest among the investment community, and suddenly the price starts shooting up. Investment demand starts increasing to such an extent that it can overwhelm the market very quickly. And the thing about investment demand that it can increase by multiples. When you're only thinking about the industrial side of the market, then you're expecting industrial demand to increase by 10% a year, fall by 5% a year, nothing more than that. You're expecting some kind of a very gentle increase in demand. You expect it to be very stable, very gradual, any increase in demand. But when you factor in the possible investment demand that can jump by leaps and bounds, and suddenly your models are completely disrupted. This is something which is very difficult to foresee. And I think they're probably going to get it wrong. They're going to put a probability of a shortage of silver, they're going to put it far too low. Certainly, they're not considering the possibility of a silver squeeze. So they're gonna get it wrong. I'm almost sure about it. But at least it's a step in the right direction, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point. The USGS probably is just looking at the industrial side of the market. They're probably not considering its use in the military either, right now, unless somebody from the military industrial complex ends up reaching out to them. But the military uses a whole lot of it. And I mean, I couldn't imagine any of the USGS guys, thinking to themselves, well, we use silver in those sono buoys that they use to find submarines, or, I heard that tomahawks have 500 ounces of silver in them, or, all the things that we think about and talk about. But it would be interesting if they do end up getting contacted by, some of these other departments. I think its use in the medical industry is something that the United States government should consider to be critical. I think that its use in the military is something the U.S. government should consider to be critical. I mean, frankly, for me, it's appalling that they don't have a national stockpile of silver right now. But of course, I'm in this world. I swim in this information, so I probably view it much differently than most of those people do. But really, I think it's past time for our country to develop a national stockpile. And then I would just like to reiterate, just because they put it on the list, even if they do end up putting it on the list, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stockpile it.
Yes,
You know,
that's correct. Yeah, it's true. Sometimes we forget how our view of the matter is unique. We're in the fringe, right?
right.
We're not mainstream. And look, I remember what mainstream analysts in the silver market, I won't mention any names, but those mainstream analysts, they assume that stackers such as you and I, if the price goes back, for instance, to $50 an ounce, we'll just sell our silver back into the market because that's the all-time high. That's their expectation. Although
Right.
$50 an ounce, if you take all the inflation into account, it's meaningless. It's not a very high number when you factor in inflation. So we have no intention of selling, but they assume that we are going to sell. So maybe they're thinking that they don't need to stockpile. If they are taking the advice of those mainstream analysts, then maybe they think the federal government thinks that it doesn't need to stockpile silver because, hey, we have those stackers. They'll sell us their silver if the price just goes high enough, goes back to its historical high, or perhaps a few bucks above that. Perhaps that's what they're thinking. I think they're in for a rude awakening.
Oh yeah, I think that they'll definitely be surprised. It appears that a lot of stackers are going to be holding on for much higher prices than $50. I'll see people in the stacking community on Reddit or on X. A lot of them are talking triple digits, and a lot of them are planning on watching the gold to silver ratio. So, if they're planning on waiting till they see the gold to silver ratio break under like 30 to 1 or something like that, these people don't view their silver in dollar terms. They view it in the amount of ounces they have. A lot of these folks. And so to meet the thresholds they're looking for, if it's someone who's keeping an eye on the gold to silver ratio, I mean, the price is going to have to be really high.
Yes, I want to say, in respect to the possibility of a huge amount of silver coming from recycling, American citizens already had two opportunities to sell their silver, assuming that they wanted to sell. One was in 1980. Back then, $50 an ounce, although it was very brief, it was a huge sum of money. And indeed, a lot of silver came to the market in 1980 and in the years following, since the price of silver was spiking and since it was suddenly very lucrative to sell your grandmother's silver spoons back to recycling because you got some good money in exchange. And then again, you've had this opportunity in 2011. And again, there were many stackers who sold some of their silver back in 2011 when it reached $50. And also people, again, selling whatever silver jewelry or silver heirlooms that they had. I'm told that the American public no longer has a lot of silver to sell, that those who wanted to sell already did it long ago. The people who are holding silver right now, like you and I, are in it for the long haul. We're not going to sell so easily. We're waiting for much higher prices, and we know what we've got in our hands. We know that we've got the winning cards in our hands. We're not going to let go of them so easily.
Right, absolutely. And if you look back at 1980 and you adjusted that $50 price for inflation, well, silver would need to be $196 an ounce, to be the equivalent of that today. And people do recognize that it's unique, that it has a lot of unique properties that can't be replaced with other metals. And they know that it's valuable, irregardless of what the spot price is right now. They're not going to give it up easily. And my guess is when they do start offloading their stacks, it'll be little bits at a time. Like they're probably not going to go dump their whole stack at one coin shop one day. They're going to hold on to it because it will be protecting them from inflation. It'll be increasing in value as it becomes harder and harder to get. And so my guess is that they're going to hold on with both hands for as long as they can. And I have to agree. I think the assumption that once we hit a certain price point, all the stackers are just going to go dump all their silver and the market's going to be flooded. I think that that's just not going to happen.
Yes, I too, I look at all sorts of indicators, such as the gold to silver ratio, which kind of tells you that we're very far from any kind of top. As a matter of fact, it indicates that the rally has just barely started. But there's another important indicator that I'm looking at, and it's just, the public sentiment. I would like to see, before I start selling any silver, I want to see some kind of a mania. I want to see some kind of a public enthusiasm. I want to see a positive media coverage of the silver market. I want to see, just as the way they cover right now, they cover Bitcoin and the way they cover all those tech stocks. I want to see some enthusiasm in the media in regards to silver before I even consider selling some. And of course, there's none of that. I mean, like, I've never had the chance to see lines of people, outside of coin shops the way they existed There were lines outside of the coin shops in Manhattan back in 1979. So I'm expecting that to return at some point, and we're nowhere near that point. Silver is still hated as an asset and looked down upon. Nobody cares about silver. So we're nowhere near that point in which it becomes mainstream. And this is what I would expect to see before we reach any kind of meaningful top.
Right. Because once it does go mainstream, or if it does go mainstream, I mean, that will really expose the true price of silver. Um, if there was lines outside of every coin shop in every city and the coin shops were getting wiped out, we would see that this metal has a lot of room to run. The GSR right now is just 87 to 1.
Yeah,
And
something like that.
I mean, it could definitely go much lower in an environment like that. Who knows? Maybe even return to historic normals.
Yes, maybe even overshoot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that could happen. Well, it's exciting that it's on the radar of the US government. It'll be interesting to see if it does start to get some mainstream attention soon because of that, or if it might just cause other governments to panic a little and also decide to follow suit and start considering it to be critical because it is absolutely necessary, not just for our country, but for any country out there to maintain their modern way of life. Well,
Definitely.
Orrin, thank you so much for coming on to speak about this today. Everyone, please check out his links in the description. Thank you all for watching today. Greatly appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day out there.
Thank you for listening to the Silver Hermit podcast. If you like this content, please donate in the link which appears in the description below. Please subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends and family. Hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I release a new video. Remember, I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This video is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be regarded as investment advice. Before taking any investment decision, please consult with a professional financial advisor who may assess your personal investment objectives and needs.